My beloved child. There are moments that seem so ordinary that almost everyone walks past them without noticing, yet they quietly change the direction of two hearts forever. This is one of those moments. Long before your paths were meant to meet, someone was already paying attention to something about you that you never imagined could matter. It wasn't your success. It wasn't your possessions. It wasn't even the words you spoke. It was something far more personal. Something visible every single day, yet almost invisible to you. Stay till the end, because what your soulmate quietly realized about your style became the beginning of a feeling they never expected to carry. Some people notice appearances for only a second before looking away. Your soulmate wasn't one of those people. Their eyes lingered, not because they were searching for perfection, but because they sensed a story hidden inside the smallest choices you make. The way you naturally put yourself together, the colors that seem to follow you, the details you choose without thinking, all of them whispered something about your heart before you ever had the chance to introduce yourself. They never said this aloud, but every silent observation became another page in a book they couldn't stop reading. What surprised them most was that your style never seemed like an attempt to impress anyone. It carried an unexpected honesty. Even on the days you felt uncertain, even when you thought no one was paying attention, there remained a quiet consistency that spoke louder than confidence ever could. They found themselves wondering how someone could appear so genuine without even realizing it. That question stayed with them much longer than they intended. And then something unexpected happened. The more they noticed you, the less they focused on what you were wearing. Instead, they became fascinated by why certain choices felt so naturally connected to who you are. It was as though every detail carried an emotion instead of simply following a trend. They couldn't explain it. They only knew that standing near you felt different from standing near anyone else. Don't skip, because this is where their quiet thoughts began turning into something they could no longer ignore. There was one particular moment they still replay in their mind. You probably don't even remember it. Perhaps it was an ordinary afternoon. Perhaps you thought nothing special happened. Yet while everyone else continued with their day, your soulmate caught themselves smiling for a reason they couldn't explain. It wasn't because you looked extraordinary. It was because you looked completely like yourself. That authenticity settled gently into their heart, leaving behind a feeling they had never experienced before. They almost laughed at themselves afterward. Why am I still thinking about this? They wondered. Days passed. Then weeks. Yet every time they imagined you again, they didn't picture expensive clothes or perfect fashion. They remembered comfort. Familiarity. Warmth. They remembered someone whose appearance seemed to match the kindness quietly reflected in their eyes. Without realizing it, they had begun connecting your outward style with the peaceful presence they felt whenever they thought about you. But there was something they never confessed. Sometimes they worried you didn't truly understand what made you memorable. They imagined you standing in front of a mirror, noticing small imperfections while completely overlooking the qualities that had already captured someone's attention. They wished they could gently tell you that the most unforgettable part of your style wasn't what others could buy, it was the calm confidence hidden inside the way you simply chose to be yourself. Something important is waiting for you. Because the compliment they wanted to give you was never about fashion at all. It was about the quiet courage they believed lived underneath every choice you made. They wanted to tell you that your style felt like an invitation instead of a performance. That it carried kindness without demanding attention. That it reminded them of someone who didn't need to become someone else to be worthy of being deeply appreciated. Those words stayed locked inside their heart, growing stronger every time they imagined finally saying them. Yet every time they came close, they hesitated. Not because the feeling disappeared. Because it became too meaningful to express carelessly. They began wondering whether you would believe them, or simply smile politely and move on, never realizing how much thought had gone into those few simple words. Little did they know, another realization was quietly forming inside them. A realization that had nothing to do with clothes, colors, or appearance. It was connected to one small detail you have probably never noticed about yourself, a detail so unexpectedly beautiful that the moment they understood it, everything they believed about attraction changed forever. And that quiet realization is only beginning to unfold. There is something remarkable about the way memories choose what they keep. Out of hundreds of faces your soulmate has seen, countless conversations they have had, and endless moments that have quietly passed, one particular image of you refuses to fade. It is not because it was dramatic. It is not because anyone else would have noticed it. It remains because, in that simple moment, your style revealed something much deeper than appearance. It revealed a glimpse of your spirit. Your soulmate never expected to become so curious about someone they barely understood. At first, they believed they were simply appreciating your sense of style. But the more they reflected on it, the more they realized they weren't admiring the clothes at all. They were admiring the feeling your presence created. There is a difference. Many people dress to be remembered. You seem to be remembered without trying. That quiet difference stayed with them. Stayed till the end, because the thought they had next surprised even them. One evening, while their mind wandered through ordinary memories, your image appeared once again. They smiled without meaning to. Then they asked themselves a question they had never asked about anyone before. What if the way this person dresses is simply an extension of who they truly are? The question lingered. It opened a door they hadn't expected. Suddenly, every small detail they remembered began fitting together like pieces of a picture they hadn't realized they were creating. The calm colors you seemed naturally drawn toward. The effortless balance between comfort and confidence. The quiet way you carried yourself without searching for approval. None of it felt accidental anymore. It felt authentic. And authenticity has a way of reaching places that appearances never can. Your soulmate began noticing something else. Whenever they imagined your future, they couldn't picture you pretending to be someone different just to fit into someone else's expectations. That realization brought them peace. Because deep inside, they had grown tired of people who constantly changed to impress the world. You felt different. You reminded them that genuine people still exist. Don't skip. Because this is where their feelings quietly became personal. They started wondering what it would feel like to walk beside someone whose outer appearance reflected such inner consistency. Someone who didn't need to be loud to be noticed. Someone whose confidence whispered instead of shouted. Someone who could make ordinary moments feel unexpectedly comforting. Without realizing it, they had stopped thinking about your style. Now they were thinking about building memories with the person behind it. That thought caught them completely off guard. It wasn't planned. It simply arrived one quiet moment and refused to leave. For the first time, they imagined introducing you to the people closest to them. Not because of how you looked, but because of how naturally they believed you would make others feel welcome. That image stayed with them longer than they expected. It felt strangely peaceful. Almost familiar. As though their heart recognized something before their mind could explain it. Yet one small uncertainty remained. There was a detail about your style they still couldn't fully understand. It appeared only occasionally. Most people would never notice it. But every time it appeared, it completely changed the emotion they felt when they thought about you. Instead of simply seeing confidence, they caught a quiet glimpse of vulnerability. And somehow, that made you even more unforgettable. They never told anyone about this. Not because it was a secret, but because they feared nobody else would understand why such a small detail could carry so much meaning. To everyone else, it would seem insignificant. To them, it became the most beautiful part of all. Because in that subtle shift, they realized something extraordinary. The person they admired wasn't trying to appear perfect. They were simply being real. And in a world filled with carefully crafted impressions, that honesty became impossible to ignore. But what they finally understood after that realization changed the way they looked at you forever. It wasn't about your style anymore. It was about the silent message your heart had been sending all along, a message they could feel, even before a single meaningful conversation had ever begun. A quiet realization arrived when they least expected it. It didn't come during an unforgettable occasion or a life-changing event. It appeared in the middle of an ordinary day, when everything around them seemed routine. Yet in that simple moment, they understood something about you that no photograph could ever capture. Your style wasn't the reason they felt drawn to you. It was simply the first chapter of a much deeper story they had only just begun to read. For a while, they tried to convince themselves they were imagining it. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. The thought crossed their mind more than once. But every time they tried to dismiss the feeling, another memory quietly returned. The way you seemed comfortable without demanding attention. The way your choices reflected patience rather than urgency. The way nothing about you felt forced. Those memories refused to disappear. Stay till the end, because the quiet conclusion they reached became something they carried with them every single day afterward. Your soulmate began paying attention to people in a different way. They noticed how easily many tried to become whoever the moment required. One version of themselves for one group. Another version for someone else. Always changing. Always adjusting. Yet whenever they thought of you, one word continued to rise above every other thought. Consistent. Not predictable. Not ordinary. Consistent. There is a quiet beauty in someone whose heart remains recognizable wherever they go. That was what they believed they had discovered in you. Without realizing it, you had shown them something they had been searching for all along. Not perfection. Not popularity. Peace. It was a peaceful feeling they couldn't explain. Even imagining a conversation with you made everything seem a little quieter inside them. As if your presence had the rare ability to slow the noise of the world without saying a single word. That feeling became precious. It wasn't excitement alone. It wasn't admiration alone. It was trust beginning to grow before there was even a reason for it. Don't skip. Because this is where their thoughts became unexpectedly personal. One evening, they imagined a simple scene. No celebration. No grand occasion. Just the two of you walking side by side beneath an open sky, talking about ordinary things. The surprising part wasn't the image itself. It was how natural it felt. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel rushed. It felt peaceful. That imagination lingered long after they tried to move on with their day. It left behind a quiet question. What if the person I've been waiting to understand has been quietly revealing themselves all along? The question stayed unanswered. Yet their hearts seemed strangely certain. Then they remembered one tiny detail. A detail almost anyone else would have forgotten. There was a day when your appearance wasn't especially polished. Perhaps you were tired. Perhaps your mind was somewhere else. Perhaps you didn't feel your best. Ironically, that became one of their favorite memories. Because nothing about your kindness seemed to change. Nothing about your quiet presence disappeared. The warmth they sensed remained exactly the same. That was the moment they realized your style had never been about looking perfect. It had always reflected something much more valuable. It reflected honesty. And honesty has a quiet strength that never asks to be noticed. From that day forward, they stopped wondering whether you could impress people. Instead, they wondered how many lives you had quietly encouraged without ever knowing it. How many smiles had you inspired simply by being genuine? How many people had walked away feeling lighter after crossing your path? Perhaps even you don't know the answer. Your soulmate certainly didn't. But they knew enough to understand one thing. The person they admired wasn't becoming more beautiful because of changing fashion. You were becoming more unforgettable because your heart continued to shine through everything you naturally chose. And then, one conversation changed everything. Someone unexpectedly mentioned you. Your soulmate listened carefully. They expected to hear comments about your appearance. Instead, they heard something completely different. A single sentence. Simple. Quiet. Almost unnoticed. Yet those few words confirmed everything they had secretly believed about you. The moment they heard it, they smiled to themselves. Because they realized they hadn't been imagining any of it. What they heard next became the one thought they have never forgotten, and it would quietly reshape the way they hope to see you in the days still waiting ahead. Sometimes the smallest conversations leave the deepest echoes. The words they overheard weren't dramatic. No one raised their voice. No one tried to make an impression. It was simply an honest observation spoken in passing, almost as though it carried no importance at all. Yet the moment your soulmate heard it, they became completely still. The sentence was this. They always look like themselves. Nothing more. Nothing less. To everyone else, it was an ordinary compliment. To your soulmate, it explained everything they had been feeling but could never put into words. Stay till the end, because that simple sentence unlocked a realization they never expected to have. They began replaying every memory they had of you. Not to judge you. Not to admire you from a distance. But to understand why your presence felt so different. Then it became clear. Your style had never been about standing above anyone else. It was about standing comfortably within yourself. There is a quiet confidence that cannot be purchased. It doesn't come from following every new trend. It doesn't depend on approval. It grows slowly, almost unnoticed, until one day people begin feeling it before they ever recognize it. That was what your soulmate saw. And once they recognized it, they couldn't unsee it. The remarkable part is that you may never have intended to send that message. You simply lived your life. You made ordinary choices. You walked through ordinary days. Yet those ordinary moments quietly told an extraordinary story. Don't skip. Because something important is waiting for you. One afternoon, your soulmate imagined what they would say if they ever had the chance to speak honestly with you. At first, they considered complimenting your appearance. Then they stopped. The words didn't feel complete. Instead, another sentence formed naturally in their heart. I like how comfortable you seem being yourself. Even in their imagination, those words felt more meaningful than any compliment about fashion ever could. Because they weren't speaking about clothes anymore. They were speaking about freedom. The freedom to remain genuine. The freedom to express yourself without constantly wondering who might approve. That kind of freedom inspired them. More than they ever admitted. As the days continued, something subtle began changing inside them. Whenever life became overwhelming, they found themselves remembering you again. Not because they expected you to solve anything. But because your quiet authenticity reminded them that life didn't always have to feel complicated. Some people bring excitement. Others bring peace. Very rarely, someone quietly brings both. Without realizing it, they had started associating your presence with hope. Not loud hope. Gentle hope. The kind that grows without asking for attention. The kind that patiently waits until someone finally notices it. Then came another realization. One that caught them completely off guard. They wondered if you even knew the effect you had on people. Did you realize that your natural way of carrying yourself encouraged others to stop pretending? Did you know that your calm confidence gave people permission to relax around you? Or had you spent all this time believing you were simply ordinary? If only you could have heard the thoughts they never spoke. You would have discovered that the qualities you overlooked in yourself were the very qualities someone else treasured most. And yet, there was still one mystery they couldn't solve. Every time they pictured your future, one image kept appearing. It wasn't about what you would wear. It wasn't about where you would go. It was about a smile. A smile that looked different from every memory they already carried. Brighter. More peaceful. As though someone standing beside you had quietly helped you become even more yourself. That image stayed with them for days. They couldn't explain why. They only knew it felt real enough to hold on to. Little did they realize, that quiet vision was connected to a single moment still waiting to happen, a moment that would make them understand why your style had caught their attention in the first place, because it was never leading them toward an appearance. It was leading them toward the person they were always meant to know. It is often the quietest discoveries that remain with us the longest. Your soulmate didn't arrive at this realization all at once. It unfolded gently, like the first light of morning spreading across a landscape that had always been there. They finally understood that what first caught their attention was never meant to be the destination. It was simply the doorway. Every memory of you began connecting in a way that felt almost effortless. The calm expression you carried when no one seemed to be watching. The thoughtful way you chose what felt right instead of what seemed popular. The quiet confidence that never asked for applause. Each memory stood on its own before. Now they formed a picture. Stay till the end, because one unexpected thought quietly changed everything they believed about attraction. Your soulmate realized that style can reveal more than taste. Sometimes, it reveals values. Without speaking, your choices seem to say, I don't need to become someone else to have worth. Whether you ever intended to send that message or not, they heard it. And it stayed with them. They found themselves comparing that feeling to countless other encounters they had experienced over the years. Many people had impressed them. Very few had made them feel at peace. There is a difference between admiration and comfort. Admiration often fades with time. Comfort has a way of growing stronger. That was the path their heart had quietly begun following. Don't skip. Because this next realization surprised them more than anything else. One evening, they imagined seeing you again after a long time apart. In that moment, they weren't wondering whether your style would have changed. They weren't thinking about colors or fashion at all. Instead, they wondered something much deeper. I hope they still smile the same way. That single thought revealed everything. Without realizing it, your appearance had gently stepped into the background. Your presence had become what truly mattered. Your soulmates smiled to themselves. They finally understood why your memory had stayed alive inside them for so long. It wasn't because you looked remarkable. It was because you made authenticity feel beautiful. That is a rare gift. Many people spend years trying to discover it within themselves. You seem to carry it naturally. Or perhaps you carried it quietly enough that even you didn't notice. As days passed, they became more aware of the little details that made you unforgettable. Not grand gestures. Tiny moments. The way you seemed comfortable in silence. The way your kindness never felt rehearsed. The way your choices reflected patience rather than urgency. None of those qualities could be purchased. None of them depended on appearances. Yet somehow, your style had been the first gentle clue pointing toward all of them. Something important is waiting for you. Because there was one final thought your soulmate kept returning to whenever they pictured you. If they ever had the chance to speak openly, they wouldn't begin with a compliment. They wouldn't mention your clothes. They wouldn't even mention your appearance. They would simply say, "Thank you for reminding me that being genuine is still beautiful." Those words lived quietly inside their heart. Perhaps one day they will be spoken. Perhaps they will remain a silent gratitude. Either way, the feeling behind them is real. And yet, just when they believed they had understood everything about why you stood out, another small moment unfolded. Someone placed two photographs side by side. One was carefully polished. The other captured an ordinary, unplanned moment. Without hesitation, your soulmate chose the ordinary one. Not because it was perfect, but because, in that single image, they saw something they had been searching for all along. The reason for that choice wasn't obvious at first. In fact, even they struggled to explain it. But once they finally understood why that simple photograph meant so much, they realized they had uncovered the most meaningful truth of all. A truth that had nothing to do with style, and everything to do with the quiet light they believed only you could carry. There are photographs that impress the eyes, and there are photographs that quietly remain in the heart. Your soulmate looked at those two images again, expecting the polished one to hold their attention. It didn't. Their eyes kept returning to the simpler photograph, the one that seemed almost ordinary at first glance. The more they looked, the more they understood that what touched them could never be measured by appearances alone. Stay till the end, because the reason behind that choice revealed something they had never admitted to anyone. The picture wasn't remarkable because everything was perfect. In fact, there were tiny imperfections. A gentle crease. A relaxed expression. Nothing arranged with precision. Yet somehow, it felt alive. Your soulmate realized they weren't searching for perfection anymore. They were searching for truth. And somehow, your quiet way of expressing yourself had become a reminder that truth is often more beautiful than perfection could ever be. That realization lingered with them for days. Everywhere they went, they noticed how often people tried to hide the little things that made them unique. They wondered how many beautiful stories were being covered simply because someone feared they weren't enough. Then they thought of you. Without knowing it, you had shown them another possibility. That authenticity doesn't ask permission to be meaningful. It simply exists. Don't skip. Because this next thought settled into their heart more deeply than they expected. They imagined the future again. Not a future filled with extraordinary moments. Just simple ones. Walking through a quiet street together. Choosing coffee without rushing. Sharing comfortable silence while watching the evening sky slowly change its colors. The surprising part wasn't the scene. It was how peaceful it felt. For the first time in a long while, they didn't imagine needing constant excitement. They imagined feeling completely at ease. That peace became precious. It reminded them that the strongest connections are often built from the smallest moments repeated with genuine care. And somehow, your style had quietly led them to that realization. Not because of what you wore. Because of what your choices reflected. They reflected patience. Gentleness. Confidence that didn't compete. Kindness that never announced itself. Your soulmate began wondering if anyone had ever truly told you how rare those qualities are. Not the kind of compliment given quickly. The kind spoken after someone has spent enough time paying close attention. Because that's exactly what happened. They paid attention. More than they ever intended. And every observation led them back to the same quiet conclusion. You never seem to pretend. Those words became impossible to ignore. Something important is waiting for you. Because there was one habit of yours they treasured more than anything else. It wasn't obvious. Most people overlooked it completely. Whenever you entered a room, you never seemed to compete for attention. Instead, you carried yourself with quiet certainty. Ironically, that made people notice you even more. Not because you demanded to be seen. Because you made others feel comfortable enough to simply be themselves. Your soulmate admired that deeply. They even wondered whether you realized how much peace you quietly carried wherever you went. Perhaps you never noticed. Perhaps no one had ever found the right words to explain it. But someone noticed. Someone remembered. Someone carried those quiet impressions long after the moments themselves had passed. Then came one final realization. It arrived so gently that they almost missed it. The style they first admired had become nothing more than a symbol. A symbol of someone who had chosen authenticity over appearance. Depth over display. Sincerity over performance. And that was the version of you they hoped would never change. Yet, one small detail still remained unanswered. There was something you always wore, or perhaps something you always carried, that wasn't visible to anyone else. It wasn't a color. It wasn't an accessory. It wasn't anything the world could point to. But your soulmate believed it was the first thing they truly noticed about you. Once they finally found the words to describe that invisible quality, everything they had felt from the beginning suddenly made perfect sense, and it revealed the most heartfelt message they had wanted to share with you all along. My beloved child. The answer your soulmate searched for was never hidden in a mirror. It was hidden in something far quieter. They spent so much time wondering why your style stayed in their thoughts that they almost overlooked the real reason. Then, one peaceful evening, everything became clear. It wasn't your clothes. It wasn't the colors you chose. It wasn't a particular look. It was the feeling you carried into every room. Stay till the end, because this was the message they had wanted to share with you from the very beginning. Your soulmate realized that every person leaves something behind after they walk away. Some leave noise. Some leave questions. Some leave unforgettable conversations. But you left peace. That was the invisible part of your style. It could never be folded into a wardrobe. It could never be copied. It wasn't something anyone could buy or borrow. It simply belonged to you. Once they recognized that truth, they stopped noticing the outward details first. Instead, they began paying attention to the quiet atmosphere that seemed to arrive with you. It was subtle. Almost impossible to explain. Yet every time they remembered you, they remembered how calm everything felt. Don't skip. Because the next realization gently changed the way they hoped to know you. Your soulmate imagined what life would be like years from now. Styles would change. Favorite colors might change. Even the little habits people notice at first could slowly evolve. But one thing, they hoped, would never change. The kindness they believed was quietly reflected in everything you did. That thought became more valuable than any first impression. It made them realize they weren't hoping to meet a perfect person. They were hoping to keep discovering a genuine one. And that made all the difference. There was another moment they never forgot. Someone asked them what stood out most about you. They paused. Several answers came to mind. Your smile. Your quiet confidence. Your thoughtful choices. But none of those felt complete. After a long silence, they simply replied. They make ordinary things feel meaningful. The conversation moved on. No one asked what they meant. But inside, they knew exactly why those words felt true. You had a way of making small moments feel enough. A simple glance. A relaxed conversation. A quiet walk. Nothing extraordinary. Yet somehow, those ordinary moments became the ones they cherished most in their imagination. Something important is waiting for you. Because this is where they finally understood the promise hidden inside your style. It wasn't asking people to notice what you were wearing. It was quietly reminding people that the most memorable presence is never created by appearance alone. It is created by authenticity. By warmth. By consistency. By the courage to remain yourself even when no one is asking you to. That silent lesson stayed with your soulmate. More than they ever expected. In fact, it changed the way they looked at everyone afterward. They stopped searching for perfection. They started searching for peace. And every path seemed to lead them back to the same memory. Back to you. Then one final thought settled gently into their heart. If they could leave you with only a single sentence. Only one. It wouldn't be advice. It wouldn't be praise. It would simply be this. Never lose the quiet light that makes you unmistakably you. Because they believed that light was far more beautiful than any trend could ever become. Far more lasting than appearances. Far more unforgettable than fashion. And perhaps, without ever intending to, you had already shown them that the most beautiful style a person can wear is a heart that remains sincere. That was the message they had carried in silence all along. And as those words finally settled within them, another realization quietly appeared, one that had nothing to do with how your soulmate saw you, but everything to do with how they quietly hoped you might one day see yourself. My beloved child. There is one truth your soulmate never found the courage to say aloud, not because the words were difficult, but because they mattered too much to be spoken carelessly. They wondered whether you had ever looked at yourself through the same gentle eyes that others sometimes quietly do. They hoped you had. Yet deep inside, they sensed you were often far kinder to everyone else than you were to yourself. That thought stayed with them. It returned unexpectedly during ordinary moments. Whenever they remembered your calm presence, another question quietly followed. What if they still don't realize what makes them unforgettable? Stay till the end, because the answer they discovered became the most meaningful part of this entire journey. Your soulmate slowly realized that people often spend years searching for qualities they already carry. Some search for confidence. Some search for belonging. Some search for approval. Yet you seem to possess something far rarer without ever trying to display it. You carried quiet sincerity. It wasn't loud enough to draw a crowd. But it was strong enough to remain in someone's memory long after they had gone home. That realization changed the way they thought about you forever. No longer did they admire your style because it looked beautiful. They admired it because it reflected a heart that seemed comfortable choosing authenticity over attention. And every time they remembered that, they smiled. Not because you were perfect. Because you were real. Don't skip. Because another memory gently returned to them. It was a moment almost too small to notice. You adjusted something about yourself for just a second. Perhaps you straightened a sleeve. Perhaps you brushed back your hair. Perhaps you simply paused before continuing your day. To everyone else, it was an ordinary movement. To your soulmate, it revealed something unexpected. You cared. Not about impressing people. About presenting yourself with quiet respect. There is a difference. One seeks applause. The other reflects self-worth. Your soulmate recognized that difference immediately. And without realizing it, they began hoping that one day you would see yourself with that same kindness. Because they believed you deserved it. As time passed, another realization quietly unfolded. The moments they treasured most weren't the ones where everything looked perfect. They were the moments where your personality quietly shone through. A relaxed smile that arrived naturally. A thoughtful expression while listening. The peaceful confidence of someone who didn't need to fill every silence with words. Those memories became priceless. They couldn't explain why. They simply knew they never wanted to forget them. Something important is waiting for you. Because the message your soulmate wished they could leave beside every mirror you ever looked into was beautifully simple. I hope one day you notice what I noticed. Not the details you criticize. Not the little imperfections only you can see. But the warmth that quietly reaches people before you even speak. The calm that follows you into ordinary places. The honesty reflected in the smallest choices you make. Those were the qualities that stayed with them. Those were the reasons your memory continued returning when they least expected it. Then a final thought settled into their heart. Perhaps style was never meant to change who you are. Perhaps its greatest purpose is simply to reveal a little more of the person already within. If that is true, then your greatest strength was never your appearance. It was the quiet character your appearance gently reflected. And that was the version of you they hoped would never disappear. Yet even after realizing all of this, there remained one question they couldn't answer. If they ever stood before you one day, would they begin by speaking about what they admired? Or would they simply smile, knowing that some of the most meaningful truths are understood long before they are ever spoken? That answer was still waiting. And perhaps, it would arrive in the quietest moment of all. My beloved child. The answer came quietly. Not through a dramatic moment. Not through a perfect conversation. Simply through silence. Your soulmate realized that some feelings become so genuine they no longer need constant explanations. They simply remain, growing stronger with every ordinary memory. They stopped asking themselves why your style had first caught their attention. Instead, they began asking something entirely different. What kind of heart creates such quiet confidence? Stay till the end. Because this final realization became the message they had unknowingly been carrying for you all along. There is a difference between being noticed and being remembered. Many people are noticed for a moment. Very few remain in someone's thoughts long after the moment has passed. Your soulmate understood that you belonged to the second kind. Not because you tried harder, but because your presence felt honest. That honesty became impossible to replace. As the days moved forward, they found themselves smiling at unexpected times. A familiar color reminded them of you. A peaceful afternoon reminded them of you. Even the gentle rhythm of an ordinary day seemed to carry a quiet echo of your presence. It wasn't the appearance they remembered first anymore. It was the feeling. The feeling that life didn't have to be rushed. That authenticity was still beautiful. That kindness could still be seen without needing to announce itself. Don't skip. Because this was the moment everything finally came together. Your soulmate imagined meeting you again. This time, there would be no nervous thoughts about first impressions. No wondering what to say. No searching for the perfect compliment. They imagined simply looking at you for a moment. Then smiling. Because they believed that smile would already say everything their heart had struggled to explain. I recognize you. Not because of your clothes. Not because of your style. Because of the quiet light they had come to associate with you. That light had never demanded attention. Yet somehow, It had gently changed the way they looked at the world. They even noticed something unexpected within themselves. They became more patient, more understanding, more willing to appreciate simple moments. It was as though remembering you reminded them to slow down and notice the beauty hidden inside ordinary life. Something important is waiting for you. Because there was one sentence they repeated silently whenever your memory returned. I hope they never feel the need to become someone they are not. They hoped you would always protect the authenticity that first touched their heart. Not because it made you different from everyone else. Because it made you completely yourself. And in their eyes, that was enough. More than enough. As they reflected on everything they had learned, one quiet truth settled peacefully within them. Style may introduce someone. Appearance may create curiosity. But character is what quietly invites a heart to stay. That was the journey they never expected to take. What began with a simple observation became genuine admiration. What began with curiosity became respect. And what began with noticing your style became appreciation for the person quietly living behind it. Perhaps that is why your memory never faded. It was never attached to something temporary. It was connected to something timeless. Then, just before they let the thought drift away, one final wish crossed their heart. They hoped that one day, when you looked into a mirror, you wouldn't only notice how you appeared. They hoped you would recognize the calm, sincere, and compassionate person reflected within. Because that was always the most beautiful part. And although they finally understood why your style first captured their attention, another gentle mystery remained. They had discovered what they admired about you. But they still wondered what would happen the day you discovered those same qualities within yourself. They believed that day would become the beginning of an even more beautiful story.